Some of you will remember Harry Katukas, who was one of many, many great members here and who died a while back. And one of the women in his building, who describes herself as the last surviving rent-controlled person in that building, wrote me a very disturbing letter. She had read my article in The Villager about fracking and about the pipeline that has moved into our neighborhood. And she wrote to say to me that she no longer cared. The pipeline's right down the street from what used to be Harry's apartment. She said she wasn't embarrassed that she didn't care anymore, but that, like the rent the landlord was proposing, she just couldn't afford it. I think you know the line from, I believe it's My Fair Lady, "Governor, I just can't afford your morality." For her, caring about fracking meant that she had to do something about it. And since she didn't think she could do anything about it, she didn't care about fracking. I understood. And I can't help but think about her as we read this scripture from Micah again. We're going to repeat it a lot. On that day, on that great day, everybody's going to sit under their own fig tree and have their own vine and have their own apartment. That's what it's saying. Your apartment or your vine will not come at the cost of somebody else's. It'll be yours. The sword of me will become the plowshares of us. Now, I know the text didn't say anything about rent control. It did say that you would have something and that everybody else would have something. That's what it said. And today I want to kind of make sure we understand the agricultural captivity of many sacred texts, right? They're always talking about shepherds, and we're always talking about silicon. They're always talking about figs and vines, and we're always talking about apartments. It's not that far, but there is some unpacking that's needed. The matter our friend was saying was about her perceived conflict between her security and the security of the whole. And that, of course, is a dangerous confusion, because in her security is the security of the whole, and the security of the whole is also her security. And the same dangerous confusion applies to this whole nature-city thing, which we hear over and over. There's nature and there's city, right? Confusions connect, and they result in our friend not caring about fracking. Instead, you see, she could be in relationship to fracking, which is the first step to fixing it. And so that's why this sermon about nature and the city is for her, and it's also about any of us who think that to love something is to fix it. Do you ever have anybody love you that way? From time to time, I have loved my husband that way. I'll take care of getting him right, and when I get him right, all will be well. And it's so funny that that kind of love violates the golden rule so many different ways, because I don't like to be loved that way. As I see it, you need to take me as I am without one plea, and fixing me almost insulting, perfect as I am. So we can care about fracking and about our own selves without having to fix either ourselves or fracking. In fact, the more you immerse yourself in the biblical literature, you find that you can't care about things separately like that, the self and others, nature and the city. You gotta care about things together. So let's unpack a few confusions. I'll start with the nature-city one. When it comes to this conversation about nature and the city, the elephant is not just in the room, The elephant has enveloped the room. The elephant's even bigger than the room. One of you said to me this week that she didn't want to come back from break because, quote, she was loving nature so much and hated to return to the city, unquote. And I have to admit, I was surprised. You don't leave the city when you go to the country, nor do you leave the country when you come to the city. I know that's the dualism, that's the idea, but it's false at its heart. In the same way, when you love someone, you don't leave yourself so much as come into yourself. But back to the city and the country, your apartment and the fig tree. You have two addresses, one on your block and the other in your region or your bioregion. I'm never going to let you forget that I grew up near the Ashokan Reservoir, upstate. And that reservoir brings water to this city. And we were so proud that we got to picnic near that reservoir. We were ridiculous about how proud we were. If anybody asked you where you came from, we came from upstate, where they send really good water down to New York City. That's who we are. We were proud of our connection and our usefulness. And surely you all also know that New York City has a very small, to be proud of, carbon footprint, and that therefore it helps nature in multiple ways all the time. Surely you also know that New York City is a great landshed where the very continent shifts from going north-south to going east-west right here. It's a really interesting land, which is why we have so many great birds here and so many great fish here and so much excitement and energy in this place where the Hudson River meets the Atlantic Ocean. You know about the monarch butterflies on Coney Island? Do you know about the East River? Do you know about being an archipelago? Do you know about Jamaica Bay? So inside the city of New York, so full of shellfish and terrapin that one writer said that the bottom of the Jamaica Bay is like a shag rug of mussels. That's what it is. I love reading Philip Lopate. He's a complicated guy, and he got himself in a lot of trouble around Atlantic Yards. He refused to condemn Atlantic Yards. You probably know that politically incorrect, Same way that people who don't condemn NYU for building up are politically incorrect. But let's go at this for just a minute. Lopate says, why shouldn't there be a high-rise in Brooklyn? Did you ever think about that? Why not? Now, NYU has put that up, and it's not helping with light on Thompson Street. It's also about to take out a lot more light on Astor Place. I don't know if you've seen that building. It's big, and we're going to have much less light. But my real fervor goes to the New School, which has put up a giant new building at 14th and 5th. And I don't know if you know it or not, but I like to walk from my house through Union Square, and then at 14th and 5th I usually pick up a bus because I'm always in a hurry. And in the winter, you could stand on the east side of Fifth Avenue at 14th Street and have sun on your face while you waited for the bus. Well, those days are over. Simultaneously, I'll bet you do remember that during Hurricane Sandy, the great green infrastructure that NYU has put together kept energy in buildings. State-of-the-art, 21st century, urban density management while taking light. If any of you know how to divide nature and city off in these terms and to do so ethically, please send me a memo immediately after this service. Urban density and complication are good things. This city is getting greener, not less green. You can hit more bicyclists than you ever could before. The myth of decline. Oh dear, the city is always destroying nature. That myth of decline just isn't true. If anything, as climate change scares the socks off us, we will find many more reasons to appreciate state-of-the-art heating and cooling plants and bikeways and subways. Don't forget that Stuyvesant Cove used to be a cement plant. It was a cement plant. Or that Hell's Gate, where the East River begins to meet the ocean, is the geographical center of our shifting landmass. It is powerful. It is wild. It is not far away. You do not have to go to the Rocky Mountains to find wilderness. You can find it down the street. All the wild places are not in the wild. I know about the Gowanus Canal, which is a super site. What language? Super site. And how many people say only germs can live there. But I've also seen the community garden. Is Jean Ovid here? I've also seen the community garden that is coming up next to Gowanus, and they've got the best green beans in Brooklyn. I'm deeply impressed with the New York Harbor and its annual Floaters Week. You know what that is. It's a terrible thing when people who have died in the rivers float up because of some absurd coagulation of tides. You have to respect that. I also have a lot of respect for rats and how they survive chemical poisoning that makes Gowanus look like something out of Whole Foods. I have respect for rats with wings, too. Don't you? They're kind of cool. So, do we really think that cities are the opposite of the country? Or that somehow an urban landscape is an upset in the natural order of life? What about population growth? What did we think was going to happen? What did we imagine was going to happen as people had people who had more people who had more people? Especially to a great and exciting place like New York City. Do we really think that people shouldn't migrate here? I think people should migrate here. I believe migration is a human right. Do we really think everybody needs 2 acres and a mule? Things are actually changing in so many ways, so many good ways, and the more population density and complexity there is, the more freedom there is to have very different lifestyles, and not to have to be as straight as your neighbors are, not to have to be the same way the people next door. I was just with R.T. Shahani, who was one of the founders of the new immigration movement out in California. And 2 really interesting things happened. The first is she now works for KQED as a reporter, and so she gets assigned every morning. And so we had to go cover a river otter that had turned up in near Cliff House in San Francisco. And we went trucking down there with her camera, and the first person she tried to interview, she said, "Oh, what do you think of this lovely river otter who's lost his way and is here in the bay?" And the guy cursed her out up one side and down the other. He said, "Get out of my face. I don't want to talk about the otter, and I want you and your camera to go away because you can't invade. This is precious. This is beautiful," that the river otter was trying to move in there. Second thing that happened, though, is she gave me her theory of immigration, which I thought was really interesting. Immigration, she says, is based in people wanting to get away from their mother-in-laws. And why not? You know? 2 acres, a mule, and a mother-in-law. So urban density and complication and mixing it up are good. And just one more example of how much things have changed. I don't know if any of you remember the story of the shark that showed up in the Gowanus Canal. Remember that? It was a big, big urban story. And Google it, it's fascinating. People were so upset that there was a shark in the Gowanus Canal that they got police and they shot it. Great idea, right? I don't think so. Contrast that story to the utter romanticization of Pale Male and Lola. What a change. What a change. Hawks are not nice birds. They're actually nasty birds. Have you ever seen them take one of your chickens or go after a pigeon? They are not cuddly. They are not romantic like nature is supposed to be. Now, I wish more people in so-called nature would be more positive towards people in cities, right? But that's not our problem. Our problem is to be here. I do think that New York's remarkably small footprint will begin to get much more attention as time goes on. And by the way, we have better horseshoe crabs here than they do on Long Island. Take that, Suffolk County. So, in order to think locally and, act locally and think globally, right? What's the missing piece? I think the missing piece is the ability to think regionally, to care without having to fix it, to be able to touch, to name, to appreciate, to be a part of a tribe that is complex and different, as opposed to a tribe that is monocultural. There are alternatives to the self-flagellating story of decline. Oh, things are getting worse and they're going to get much worse. There are alternatives to that story, and the alternative is not progressivism. The alternative of progressivism is, oh, things are just going to get better and better, and technology will resolve all these problems, right? So you've either got the tisk of decline or the false idea of improvement by technology. There is another way, and that is the capacity to be in relationship with another person, or with a horseshoe crab, or with a city, or with somebody who's different, and not try to fix them. Just to be in relationship with them. Say, look, I happen to live in this region, and I live here. I dwell here. This is my habitat. It ain't perfect. And I don't like my mother-in-law. I can't believe she moved in with me. But not to try to fix things. So what is New York regionally? Minimally, we're 3,500 square miles of land and water, an area including all or part of 9 New York and 12 New Jersey counties. Did you know that you can go to lunch in the Meadowlands? That transportation improvements make it such that you can just get on a train, look at that beautiful Meadowlands, get off in 7 minutes, have lunch, and come back. You live in the Meadowlands. You can go to the Hackensack Highlands, too. You can go to Roosevelt Island for dinner and see the gorgeous new Roosevelt Island sculpture on the end, 40 years in the making. Because of our unique nature as an archipelago, every spring and every fall, our region is outstanding for bird watching. Did you know that? Outstanding. The Ramble in Central Park has 30 species of warblers. We have a friend who swears he can find a mushroom in Central Park any day of the year. The same hawk who lives in an apartment building lives on a cliff in the Palisades. They move around. Why don't we? So I want to just do one more thing, maybe two. Would you mind if I mentioned Hegel and Marx just once? I haven't done it for a long time. Okay, thank you. For them, first nature means original and pre-human nature, and second nature means the artificial nature that people erect on top of nature. So first nature is the fig tree, right? And second nature is the apartment. But what is most real is their connection. They're parents and children of each other, first nature and second nature. And yes, the mother-in-law comes with it. The relationships you can't fix, you also can't get away from. And that goes for the pipeline and fracking too. Aldo Leopold in the Sand County Almanac says this: we can be ethical only in relationship to something we can see, feel, understand, or otherwise have faith in. You can't be in relationship ethically with something that's an it. Why bother? So let's de-it nature. He also says the oldest task in human history is to live on the land without spoiling it. We haven't spoiled it yet. I'm not sure we're going to spoil it, because how can you spoil someone you love? How can you stop fixing her or him or it long enough to be in relationship with it and to give it a name? And from there, so much more is possible. Amen.